The bell that didn't ring. The bell was supposed to ring at exactly 2:45. Everyone knew that. Teachers planned around it. Students watched the clock like hawks. When it rang, the day ended. Simple, predictable, done. I checked the clock above the whiteboard. 2:44. My foot bounced against the leg of my desk. The classroom smelled like dry erase markers and dust, and the air felt heavier than it had all day. I had already stuffed my notebook into my backpack, pretending to listen while counting seconds in my head. 2:45. Nothing happened. At first, no one noticed. A few students kept whispering. Someone laughed quietly in the back. Then the clock ticked again, loud enough to hear. Tick, tick. The teacher looked up. "Well," she said, folding her hands on the desk. "Since we still have time, let's talk about something important." Groans rippled across the room. I slumped lower in my seat, annoyed. The day was over. It was supposed to be over. I had plans. I had already decided that nothing else mattered. She walked slowly toward the front of the room. "Tell me," she asked, "what do you do when things don't go the way you expect?" No one answered. I stared at the scratch on my desk, tracing it with my finger. I didn't want to talk. I wanted the bell. I wanted out. She waited. Finally, someone muttered, "Get mad." A few people nodded. Another voice added, "Complain." More nodding. She smiled. Not the kind that meant she was amused, but the kind that meant she was thinking. "And then what?" she asked. Silence again. I didn't know why, but my hand went up before I could stop it. She looked surprised. "Yes?" I swallowed. "I guess you deal with it." The room went quiet. She nodded slowly. "Exactly." At that moment, the bell rang. Sharp, loud, final. Chairs scraped, bags zipped. The moment vanished, just like that. But as I walked out into the hallway, the sound of that bell felt different than it ever had before. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like punctuation. A period at the end of a sentence I hadn't known I was writing. Later that night, when something else didn't go my way, something bigger than a missed bell, I thought back to that moment. The waiting, the silence, the choice. And I realized something I hadn't learned from any textbook. Life doesn't run on bells. It runs on how you respond when they don't ring. Let's start with the beginning of the story. In a narrative essay, the beginning is where the writer establishes setting and situation. Notice how the story opens in a very ordinary place, a classroom, at a very specific moment, the end of the school day. The writer uses small, concrete details to help us picture the scene. The smell of dry erase markers, the sound of feet tapping, eyes watching the clock. These details aren't random. They place the reader inside the moment. The situation is simple. Everyone is waiting for the bell to ring. The bell represents something important. The end of the day, freedom, and predictability. At this stage, nothing has gone wrong yet. The writer is setting expectations so that when something changes, the reader feels it too. In the middle of a narrative, we usually see the problem begin to form. Here, the problem is subtle but effective. The bell doesn't ring. That small disruption creates tension. Notice how the writer shows reactions instead of explaining them. Whispering, groaning, slouching in a chair. This section also introduces an internal conflict. The narrator isn't just annoyed with the situation. They don't want to engage or think any further. Then the teacher asks an important question. What do you do when things don't go the way you expect? This question pushes the story forward. It forces the narrator and the reader to confront the situation instead of avoiding it. This is what rising action looks like. The tension is building, even though nothing dramatic has happened yet. The climax of a narrative is the turning point, the moment where something changes. In this story, the turning point isn't loud or dramatic. It's internal. After silence and weak answers from classmates, the narrator raises their hand unexpectedly. The line, "I guess you deal with it," is the key moment of the entire essay. This is where the narrator shifts from frustration to understanding. Pay attention to how timing is used here. The bell rings immediately after this realization. That contrast matters. The bell finally rings, but the narrator has already changed. A strong narrative climax doesn't always involve action. Sometimes it's a moment of clarity. In the ending of a narrative essay, the writer shows the result and reflects on the lesson learned. The physical situation resolves. Class ends, students leave. But the meaning continues. Notice how the narrator reflects later, not immediately. This shows that the lesson lasted beyond the moment. The bell becomes a symbol, not just of dismissal, but of expectations and control. The final lines explain the message without over-explaining it. Life doesn't run on bells. It runs on how you respond when they don't ring. This is what a strong narrative ending does. It connects one small moment to a bigger truth. When you write your own narrative, your goal isn't just to tell what happened. It's to show why it mattered. As you move into your own narrative writing, remember this structure. Begin by placing your reader in a specific moment. Build tension through a problem or conflict. Focus on one turning point. And end with reflection. The story doesn't need to be dramatic. It needs to be meaningful.